Today's episode: the role of the individual during the great transition of our time. A chat with philosopher, poet, and sage Johnny Price. I want to inspire you to activate your inner philosopher because the world needs your reflections about the meaning of your life within the context of all the chaos going on. As C.G. Jung said something like, the fate of humanity depends upon the self reflecting individual so as not to get swallowed up by mass minded ideas fueled by fear and anger. Before I continue, could I ask a favor? Please rate this episode and share it with others to help me grow a movement of self reflecting humans faster. And becoming a $5 monthly supporter is also appreciated. My guest today is someone I've been following on Instagram. His beautiful and striking images caught my attention first. I would linger in them, aware that my mind was caught off guard, which is always a good thing for me. Then I started reading the long, meandering posts that accompanied the images. They were like a stream of consciousness that contained so many golden nuggets that it was impossible for my mind to force a lazy and familiar interpretation. It felt like a seduction of sorts by the time I came across the black and white photo of Johnny Price looking stoic. Reading his profile only intrigued me more. Johnny calls himself a poet, philosopher, sage, shaman, and a Buddhist warrior monk in search of truth. And his collection of 2,000 books puts me to shame. Oh, and he's working on his first novel, too, which we'll talk about. Now I just had to have a chat with this man. Part of Johnny's story is that after having lived what he called a devout Christian life, he felt called into the ministry. And here's where he found himself grappling with a notable avoidance of addressing inconsistencies within the teachings. Sound familiar? This internal struggle led him to diverge from the conventional religious path. Preparing for this interview was difficult because I sensed we could chat for hours and even days. I didn't know what to focus on. And then, as I allowed myself to be still for a few minutes, this is rare, three images or ideas burst out of my unconscious. First, I became preoccupied with the role of the philosopher. And this led me to my feelings about the movie Poor Things, and then another movie, Aquaman. Sounds crazy, which is why my intro today is a little longer. I want to explain the intersection of these odd thoughts and my excitement for this chat. So let me explain. I've often felt the blurred line between philosophy and depth psychology, and I did a little research, which I thought might interest you too. Wikipedia and the Department of Philosophy at Florida State University helped me out, and I've included the links below. The root of the word philosophy is love of wisdom, which of course is not the same as information or knowledge. Philosophy involves the activity of seeking to understand fundamental truths, truths about oneself, the world in which they live, and their relationship to the world around them, including other humans. Philosophy is a systematic study of questions concerning topics like existence, reason, knowledge, value, mind, and language. It is a rational and critical inquiry that reflects on its own methods and assumptions. How often do you reflect on your assumptions? The study of philosophy involves not only forming one's own answers to such questions, but also seeking understanding of the way the questions have been answered in the past. What often motivates the study of philosophy is not merely the answers or arguments, but whether the arguments are good and the answers are true. Finally, philosophy is a lens through which many topics can be considered, including law, religion, the mind, feminism, science, literature, history, the arts, language, politics. I suppose a philosopher then is someone who loves knowledge and contemplating how it is acquired, someone who is self reflective about the meaning of their own existence within the collective of humanity, someone who can consider and hold the tension between competing theories and views to discover truth for oneself, and maybe even enjoys inspiring others to wonder about such questions. Does this describe you? Maybe in solitude, or maybe you found a community to share your thoughts about big life questions. On to the movies. In the film Poor Things, Martha and Harry refer to themselves as the philosopher and the cynic. They don't take up much time in the film, but they play a significant role in Bella's transformation. Together, they frustrate her and inspire her to wrestle with big questions for herself, not providing answers, rather insisting that she come to her own conclusions, which she does. In fact, as we transition to the final act of the movie, we see a surreal image of Bella standing tall and walking over a bridge, carrying a suitcase full of her newly formed opinions. Onto Aquaman. In addition to being in love with Jason Momoa, the film brought to life what I had just read in a book back then. The author, Jungian analyst, Robin Robertson, titled Beginner's Guide to Revelation, a Jungian Interpretation. My mind was blown considering the psychological truths that the analyst explored, which appear in the last book of the New Testament of the Christian Bible. The story is presented as a dream rich with symbols and visions. Well, then I got overwhelmed again by the richness of exploring some of the symbolism, especially of the seven churches. The seven churches as attitudes present today in a time of transitioning from the chaos to an expansion of consciousness. The seventh church is the new attitude, which is not yet conscious. In the film Aquaman, there are seven kingdoms that emerge after Atlantis sinks due to its hubris and arrogance. The fisherman kingdom is made up of philosophers and intellectuals, and its king is murdered by Orm. Orm is set on retribution against the land dwellers, which he knows will end up destroying everyone, but he doesn't care. Aquaman proves he is worthy enough to secure the powerful trident and ride the beast to battle only after he survives the humbling journey to the missing kingdom, which is guarded by the trench beasts. These beasts have no capacity for reason, only primal instincts to attack. It's like a regression or a circling back to get the new insight needed to evolve. What connects all these meandering thoughts? A constant death and rebirth process, not only for individuals and societies, but of the entire collective of humanity. There is a role for the philosopher during these times, and we need as many people as possible to activate their inner philosopher, to accelerate the expansion of consciousness before it's too late. So today, I'm asking you to engage your inner philosopher and wonder about the meaning of your existence and the role you might sense you're being called to serve during this chaotic time when many systems and stagnant ideas are being dismantled. Can you surrender to the change that wants to happen? Let's get started. Welcome, Johnny. Welcome to Dose of Depth podcast.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. So, how are you doing? And I'm really curious about what a typical day, week, month is like in the life of someone like you who has all these roles: poet, sage, philosopher, writer. So, tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, my day's going well. They normally start about 4 a.m.
Oh my
So I
gosh.
get up every morning at 4 a.m. I take a shower, walk my dog, go to work. And I deal with about 40 people a day where I take care of their programming, their exercise programming. So everything is science based. So basically what I do is I take a series of exercises and I put them in a certain order so that I help them maximize their exercise and time efficiency. So I do that about 40 hours a week. And then I try and write about another 15 to 18 hours a week. And then try to fit in exercise and walking my dog and taking care of my house. I'm a proponent of feng shui. And so I like my place to have a certain vibe, my yard to have a vibe, and all those things I think are important is how as far as how I feel about the vibe that I create and what that brings to me. Um, I hate it when I walk into a house and I feel like, someone just hasn't like created a vibe that they can grow from and learn from, and it feeds them as well. So for me, I've got 30 plants in my house and I have art and I've got all kinds of really amazing things that kind of feed me at the same time. And I think it may be more important to some people than it is others, but for me, that whole identity of how my place is super important. So,
Oh,
um,
Absolutely, because sometimes for some of us, there's really a blurring of the boundary, right, between our vibration, and of course, we're just, little vibrating things, and
Yeah,
the rest of the world. And it really,
yeah.
like, your home is your sanctuary. That's
Oh,
how
it's my
I'm the
safe
same
haven.
way. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's my safe haven. So, it's where I come to decompress and I reflect here more often than any other place that I go to. So again, for me, this place creates something as well. But my days are normally pretty busy and I'm very structured. So, even on my weekends when I'm not working, I get up, at 6 o'clock. I'm at the bakery, which is a bakery slash coffee shop. I'm there at 7 a.m. I write till 11. I train a client at noon. I work out. I go back and write some more. Even on the weekends, I have a pretty structured lifestyle. So that I can just kind of maximize my time, especially when it comes to the writing and getting my book finished. So yeah,
Well, it sounds like you look at your whole life as a kind of practice,
it is. Yeah.
right? Right?
I mean, for
So
me, it
so
is,
yeah.
and I think, when I was younger, I just didn't look at life the same way. And whether that's wisdom or self reflection, whatever that may be, I just really flew by the seat of my pants as a young man. And as I've gotten older, I really have learned to appreciate my life and my time here and what's important and how I want to spend my days. And right now, other than when I'm working, my book is absolutely the most important thing that I do day in and day out. This novel that I've started is something that is beyond important to me as far as how I write this, how I articulate it, the message that it sends, how it's received, the story that it tells. All these things, I hope create a novel that once you pick the book up, you do not want to put it down till it's over. And when it's over, you go through a state of depression because the book has ended. Like I want it to affect people in that way.
I love it. And we're gonna talk about your
Yeah,
novel. So
absolutely. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
love it. You're already inspiring. Like it. And I was wondering in my intro, of course, I told people how I found you and just sort of first it was the images, and then it was
Yeah.
these meandering posts, and then it was that
Right.
picture of you, and it was like the seduction. And so I was wondering, and you've already agreed to, that you
Yeah.
could kind of start us off with reading one of
Yeah.
your pieces of writing, and we'll just and take your time, and we'll just allow people to sort of linger in it, because like I said, there's so much in your meandering posts that, I mean, literally I feel like I could reflect about like 20 different things. There's so
You
much
know,
going on.
and,
Yeah.
and none of what I write is very short. You rarely will you find something that's one or two sentences or maybe three or four. Normally, it's 300 or 400 words to 500 or 600 words. So I'm never short on saying something.
I love it.
And when I'm trying to convey something, I like to use my unlimited capability to put words in such a way that it conveys a better message. Now, I'm not
Mhm.
saying at times it's not better to write something short and sweet and poignant, but I think there's also times when I want to write something that people go, "Oh my gosh, I love that." For me, it's about inspiring people. If I can write something and someone reads that and it resonates with them, then I feel like I've done something important. Whether
Well,
there's monetary success with that or not, that's not important. But if people can read something that you create, and you've written a book, so you like to inspire. I think that's what we look for is the ability to help another human being or inspire them in such a way that it changes their life for the better.
yeah, and also in during a time where not everyone has a short attention span, but let's say like just sort of how communication has gone, where even if you want to dig in, nobody's presenting really meandering thoughts like
Right?
you are. So it's almost
Yeah,
refreshing to come
yeah,
across something where you're like, oh, wait, what is he saying? Like
yeah,
there's just so
yeah.
much
It's
that it
almost like they're
slows.
little essays, like
Yeah, yeah. So
yeah.
it's good. It's something. So I think you stand out because everybody else is just trying to use like three words or sayings, and I don't know. And
They're
also
looking for
like,
catchphrases, I think, a lot of times. They're
yeah,
looking for something catchy and short and sweet where I want you to be able to sit down and read something for a length of time and go, "Oh my gosh, I love that."
yeah,
So
yeah. So let's have you read this piece.
Yeah. So this piece, I actually wrote that, let's see here, about 3 or 4 years ago. And I had just signed the lease on my building, and I was sitting around one day and I was just thinking about, thoughts going through my head. And so I actually flipped over the lease agreement here and I wrote this on the back. And so this is actually the original pen scratch for when I originally thought up this little thing that this ditty that I was going to write.
I
So
love it.
I will read this to you if I can pull it off and sound legitimate here. So, uh, deep within our awareness, cast suspicion on our perceptions of life, attempting to dismiss instincts due to fear. An obsessive trait compels acknowledgement we can no longer deny, allowing dread to cloud clarity and perpetuate illusions, outright lies. In the deepest part of our soul, an inner dimension reveals truth, not the truth of philosophy, mathematics, or history, but a disclosure that arises in quiet moments when life's routines become transparent. A burst of sublime meaning emerges, vital encounters, shedding light on the truth beneath the fabric of ordinary lives. An immense awakening occurs, a realization that our held life may be more than folly than imagined. The epiphany possesses the power to unlock life's mystery if we submit to leaving uh, leaving behind commitments to security and the familiar. Embracing the obscurity with freedom, newfound transparency opens up opportunities to stroll naked under the stars. Finally, comprehension dawns the limits that are mere illusions overshadowed by fear and understanding of our inherent boundlessness. The journey unfolds, a life woven with introspection, challenging perceptions, and embracing the profound complexity of our existence.
Thank you.
Yeah, so
I
that was 4 years ago.
I
Yeah,
love it. Well, when I read it, I was like, "Oh, I feel like you wrote that for this conversation because it is exactly what that's about for me is that during this time, uh there's a need for wondering about who we are because
right.
everything is kind of falling apart around us. So we can either get swept up in the fear and the uncertainty and the anxiety of that, or some of us can begin to go inward, which Carl Jung said is the final frontier, not space or the
Absolutely.
ocean. And as we go inward, then eventually all that self-reflection brings something up out of the collective unconscious that is a new idea, new attitude, new what was to see
Absolutely.
what we couldn't see before. So I
Right.
love it. Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I'm also, if it's okay, going to put it in on a blog post, and I'll put
Yes. Absolutely.
links to your Instagram so people can find more of your writing. So
Yeah.
uh,
Absolutely.
so thank you. So let's talk about your really interesting journey. And maybe you could share a little bit about like how all these different parts of you happened and came together, right? So was it this that sort of led you to philosophy, that led you to poetry, or maybe when you were 5, you started writing? Like how did it all work together
I,
to make you who you are now?
for me, it started with reading.
Okay.
And I remember as a kid, I used to, with one of my best friends, we would go catch crawdads at the local creek and we would sell them to the bait store. And so you only got like 2 or 3 pennies per crawdad. All right. So we would try to go catch 3 or 400 at a time so we could just get a few dollars. And so my friend, he would buy candy from the convenience store and I would buy comic books to read. So even at a young age, 7, 8 years old, I just wanted to read.
Mhm.
And the first book that I ever purchased in school was The Adventures of Tom Sawyer by Mark Twain.
Mm.
And so I was always fascinated with reading stories and immersing myself in something that someone else created, even as a young age. And that inspired me to write poetry. And so I remember, being in high school, and I think that's when I really started writing a lot as far as in-depth poetry and all the things that meant something to me: life, love, existence, death, sadness, all the
Mm.
different emotions that we can suffer through that create and leave something behind for us. And so that's when I really started writing a lot. And then, that brought on my study in belief systems and religions, and that created more of an existential, philosophical idea of what life was and meaning and what is our purpose here. And I think that's really just transcended throughout my life. For me, I still have, on a personal level, the mindset of a 12-year-old kid. Like, I'm super curious about so many things, even to this day, and I'm obsessed with buying books. And so, like, I buy books and I read part of one, and then I'll buy another and read part of that. And I've got like 5 books that I'm reading at one time, and then I'm marking notes and pages, and then I'm buying more books, and just trying to consume myself with understanding and learning. I think it's such a lost art once you become an adult. Now, I think when you're in high school and you're in college, I think there are probably millions of kids that are at a place where they want to learn. They want to walk on to a university and feel like they're in a place of higher learning. Walking onto a college campus, I think for me was one of those things where I thought this is the greatest place ever. To feel like you were surrounded by knowledge and you wanted to understand and you wanted to delve into mysteries and you wanted some clarity and you wanted to be able to bring your own questions and have them answered or not. And some of these things aren't easily answered. And sometimes it can take decades or years or a lifetime to come to some kind of a conclusion. And so I think for me in my life, that's where I'm at even to this very day.
Mhm.
Um, I'm just wanting to learn more about life, its meaning, why we're here, what is our purpose, what are our downfalls, what are we not seeing in our repeated mistakes, and what is the cause of that that keeps us from moving forward as a race of people. We talked about this the other day about love and the idea of loving someone and giving and receiving. To me, other than having children, is the greatest honor that can be bestowed to a human being. But repeatedly, we fail as a society in nurturing that and making it last. Now, some people may believe that love's not meant to last. It's all just temporary. And in your lifetime, you'll have dozens of partners. And for someone, that might be great if that's what you believe. For me, I've always believed there's someone out there, that perfect fit, that piece to the puzzle, that my forever person that, I want to spend the rest of my life with. And then even in my passing, in my next stage in life, I'm going to be able to go through time and space and find that person, and we're going to be forever. So, and I know that seems fanciful, but for me, that's where my heart speaks to me. It tells me something in those
Well,
moments of
well,
introspection when it comes to love.
well, that kind of yearning has clearly has a literal aspect, but it also has a symbolic aspect, right? So the
Yeah,
yearning that you sense is partially about the literal finding of a human being.
yeah,
Also is a yearning for something bigger, something else that can't really necessarily be articulated through the literal. So
right,
the different kinds of yearnings that people have, we only know partially what the purpose of that yearning is.
yeah,
It's
right,
the yearning that keeps you like moving forward. It's like you're being called to something, and then
right.
along the way it's like these little experiences that you accumulate on your path to get this thing that you're yearning for.
Right, right, right. And for me, I've written about this as well, about attachment, and we shouldn't get attached. But I think attachment isn't a bad thing. Attachment doesn't necessarily mean possessiveness, and those are two
Right.
different things. If I love something, what is the likelihood of me not becoming attached to that? I love
Mhm.
my kids. I'm attached to them. I love my dog. I'm attached to him. I love my books. I'm attached to them. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's how we nurture attachment that can be bad if it's not something that comes from love and kindness and trust and all those things that lead us to a better place. And so that's where I think that attachment can be a great thing, but it also can be something that could be harmful if it's not treated appropriately, you know.
Well, right. Well, there's a light and a dark side to everything. So I think like the discernment is the degree to which the attachment is based on neediness. Like if I need you to complete me, that's not pure love, right? That's not pure
No,
love. That's like,
I
right,
agree totally.
exactly. But so there's a difference. And
Right.
it's so funny how many people don't really know how to be in that space.
Right.
That's like, okay, is my love freely given, or is it because I need someone to mirror back that I am of value? And then that's
Right.
when you could go to the dark side of love.
So I think what's really cool is that when you get to be our age and you're single, you've been married, maybe divorced, whatever,
Mhm.
and you spend any amount of time alone, you really learn that I'm happy either way. I'm good.
Yeah.
I'm good in my isolation. I'm good in my studies, in my life, and what keeps me busy and what keeps me grounded, in my children, whatever it may be. If I never met another person in my life, I would absolutely be happy. Now, if I'm blessed enough to find that,
Hmm.
then I want to be able to honor that as well and
Yeah.
treat it the way it needs to be treated. So again, I'm sure you would feel the same way. You're okay either way. You're happy, you've got your life. But if you
Yes,
happen
but
to
yes,
find that person, you know, I
yes,
mean,
but that realization didn't happen right away. It took me a couple of years. Like you're
well,
kind of
we've all been through that. We've all been through that.
you get
And it takes
anxious
a while.
about,
Yeah.
yeah, you get anxious
Yeah.
about being in solitude, and then all of a sudden you're like, "Oh, I like this. I really
Yeah.
like this. Like
Yeah.
I like a little of this too, but I really like this."
When you
So,
get so set in your ways, you know it makes you happy, you know, you have your routines.
yeah.
So it comes to a point to where liking someone isn't the problem, loving someone isn't an issue. What could potentially be a problem is conjoining two lives, and how do we do that once it goes beyond just mere liking? Because then it's like, who sacrifices what? Who gives up their home and who keeps their home? And do I lose part of my identity in the process? And then
Mhm.
we don't want to do that, especially at a certain age, because you worked hard to achieve that, you know. So
Yeah.
there lies those boundaries that we're talking about. So
Yeah, and I think, I love relationships and I love exploring them because all of the conventional and stagnant ideas are just sort of falling away so that people can find their own way without being,
yeah,
being worried about being shamed that they're not doing relationship the right way. So,
I feel like there's certainly a lack of long-term commitment in relationships. For whatever reason, we make these holy commitments, you know, these forever commitments, but you know, statistically, it doesn't look like we keep our word to that. However you want to look at that, and but what is it that leads us on the path where we no longer believe in the commitment we made at that time? So, you know, maybe we should say, I just love you now. And if it doesn't work, we'll set each other free, you know, like
well,
you can
one of my
change how that's worded, you know, versus forever and ever, you know.
That's funny that you bring that up because one of my colleagues from school, she was I mean, big brain, man. She was like 28 in this PhD program, but she was getting married. And that's exactly what they did. Part of their vows were to say, this is our intention, but also that, it, to not cling to an expected outcome because I have a three P's framework of relationship, and the need for something to last is often gets in the way of it lasting because when you're worried about something not lasting, then you're not honest. And it's
Yeah.
the honesty that prompts the growth that makes the relationship stronger. Right.
Right.
So the
Right.
more that you let go of like, I need this to work, the more honest you are, and then the more likely the
Right.
relationship actually can last. So
Right. No, I agree.
fantastic.
I agree.
So, okay, so as a philosopher and sage and seeker of truth, what
Yeah.
has been your biggest insight about, and maybe you have many, but what has been one of your biggest insights about yourself as you seek truth? And I'll just throw out a couple questions and you go wherever you want. So,
Good.
what meaning have you found in the way your life has unfolded the way it has? What's the sense of purpose of your life? And how does it connect with the collective you like to share and inspire? Do you think there's a role that you're being called to play in this march towards expanding consciousness? And then also, there might be certain people, role models, or theories, or views, or lenses that help you, that helped you do this kind of reflection uh, because we do need a framework for how, because
Yeah.
it's such a big question,
I
right?
mean,
So,
certainly, yeah. I
so
think
wherever
that
you want
there's
to go with
certain
that.
I think there's influences that we get from different avenues all the time. I had an uncle when I was, who's still alive to this day, who, when I was really young, always tried to inspire me to live a better life. And I went through a phase when I was in high school, where I was just kind of a free spirit. I just wanted to go do things and try things. And my family was always worried about me. But it was part of my experience in learning about freedom and
Mm,
trying things and doing things. And I was just that free spirit kind of, guy. I just wanted to be out there living life and experiencing things. And certainly that has molded me into the person that I am today. And it helped me raise my kids and guide them and not be fooled by certain things that maybe someone who was more naive might be, because I could see through all of those things that could be deemed poor choices. But my kids, I have to admit, were wonderful growing up, and they're great kids to this very day, and they gave me no problems, nor their mother growing up. Um, but my uncle was a big influence on my life. My training coach was a big influence on my life, and just learning how to be disciplined. He was probably the one person at a young age that taught me how to be disciplined, and that how I managed my time would determine the results of the time and effort that I spent doing anything, even though for him it pertained to training. But if I looked at that at other avenues in my life, whether it be education or studying or reading or writing or poetry, and I looked about how I managed my time, I certainly learned how to value that, and make the most of my time. And I do that to this very day. Um, I think, studying philosophy and reading about different philosophers, certainly there are those who inspire you. I think for me, Marcus Aurelius, and Stoicism and Stoic philosophy was, for me, a great avenue into trying to understand the walk that I wanted to have, as far as even existentialism. So I think, there are certain philosophers of the dozens and dozens that I've studied that stand out. I'm a huge follower of Ayn Rand, and a lot of people either love her or hate her. I think often her books are um, misinterpreted and what her meaning actually was. Um, the first time I ever read Atlas Shrugged, I was probably about 16 years old. And I had a friend, and she was in her 40s, I would say, at the time. And she gave me the book to read. And I read it, and I absolutely fell in love with it and fell in love with the characters and the story. And I probably read that book 6 or 7 times in my life. I actually wrote an essay about it years ago in school. And so there are certain things that stay with you in your
mhm.
life, and that help guide you and mold you in certain directions. I'm sure you have certain authors or individuals that have inspired you over your lifetime that you felt kind of mold you into the person that you are today. For me, I think one of the main things that I try and do every day is to self-reflect at the end of every single day, and to be able to do that objectively so that I'm aware of my mistakes. I'm aware if I didn't handle a situation properly. I'm aware if I need to say that I'm sorry, and to be able to say those things. And I think those just help us become better people. And I think we all have to ask ourselves, what do we want from ourselves as individuals? What do we want our life to be like? And what do we want to stand for? And it's easy to commit to rainbows and fairy tales and strawberry fields forever. But what about when life gets hard? Where's our commitment to that? And I think that's where we struggle as a society at times, because we're committed to cotton candy, but we're really not committed to the values and the things that can establish us as an individual and what that means, to us internally, as you were saying a minute ago, when it comes out to being the people that we should want to be in the end.
So, okay. So, how would you answer that question for yourself, though? You talk a lot about people and we, and you know that saying about we teach what we need to learn. right?
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
every
Yeah.
time I have a recognition that, oh, people call me, like back in the day when I had a consulting company and I worked with small nonprofits, they used to call me the cheerleader for small nonprofits because I was like, yeah, the little guys.
Yeah.
And at a certain point I realized like, oh, that's because I need to be my own cheerleader. I need
Yeah.
to like, right?
Yeah.
So how would you answer that question? What is, what is
Uh,
it that what is it that you're modeling, and what is it like, what is something interesting that you learned about yourself that you were like, for example, something that also humbled you? So for example, when I was like 48, I received an award, and it was a United Way award, and five of us got it, and we got to do a little speech. And in my speech, I was like recognizing and feeling gratitude for all these people who had said, "Yeah, Deb, of course you can do that," throughout my life. And then at one point, I read what I wrote, and I just started bawling. And it was simply, "I make a difference walking around being me." And I cried so hard that my son was like, "Dad, go rescue mom. My God." She's like, it was in front of 100 people. And what I realized was that the unconscious agenda or purpose of my call to be an activist was to feel validated. Now, I still did good work. That didn't take away from my activism work, but it wasn't pure as effective activism if I didn't need it to
right.
do something for me. Right. So that's an example of, I was like, oh my God, now I feel off. At first I felt so terrible and selfish. What do you mean? I've been an activist because I needed to feel better about myself. And I was like, yeah, but then I didn't need to. Then I could let that go away. So like, what's an example of something you discovered about yourself that you were like, oh,
I
oh,
think
or
for a long time, though I loved writing, I probably questioned, am I any good at it? You
mhm.
know, do people read my stuff and actually enjoy reading the things that I'm taking the time to put, pen to paper and try to create something? And then I won a contest about 10 years ago or so. And I thought in that moment that I was better than I thought I was. Not that I thought I was horrible, but you just never know, because a lot of times people may read your stuff and it could be lots of people, but you don't get any feedback. So you just don't know where you stand with the audience. And I think for me, realizing that somebody outside of my circle read something that I had written, graded it, and thought it worthy to win something, I think was the first one of the first times that I thought, okay, like I might be legitimate. I might be someone that is writing something that's worthy of someone reading it and having an effect on their life. I think for me as well, especially when it comes to my business, I really like to teach people how to be emotionally and physically stronger. Um, and I think sometimes we kind of forget how to do that. And through the programming that I create, it teaches you how to push your boundaries physically, but also mentally as well. So I think, I always tell my clients, emotionally and mentally, whether you stay with me for 6 months or 5 years, I want you to walk away and know that you're better for it. That mentally, emotionally, physically, you are a stronger human being, and that you feel like that helps you every day in life. Um, so, for me, I think those are certainly some things that are of great importance.
And
I
what do you
think
and what do you think is like, what's your unfolding purpose? What's your purpose?
I think for me, honestly, as much as I enjoy so many things in life, and I put my children at the front of importance, um, I think if I could write something, a novel, and then finish it, and have someone pick up a 500 or 600 page book and read it, and then put it down and go, "That's one of the greatest things I've ever read in my life. I need to share that with other people." I think to me, that would be the ultimate validation of years and years and years of trying to hone a craft. Because, basically, when you're writing, you're putting words together in sentences and phrases and paragraphs to create and convey a message of some
Mhm.
sorts. And so, if someone can do that and have a profound effect on someone emotionally and touch their heart or touch their soul and have an impact on them, that's one of the coolest things that you'll ever do as a person.
Yeah.
And I've read so many books, and you have too. And you've put books down before where you're like, oh my gosh, I loved that book. That book changed my life. That
Yeah.
book inspired me, whatever it may have been. And so I think if I could create something in my lifetime and know that I was able to be that type of author, I think it would just validate years and years of time and effort into trying to be somebody that is worthy of being read by other people, you
I
know?
love I love it.
Um,
I love it. You're sharing yourself, and that's a great segue into my next question was about the novel. And I suspect that, your novel almost represents or is an expression of like all of this, your life. And
Absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah,
so maybe so
100%.
now
Yeah.
take a couple of minutes and tell me a little bit about like why did you when did you decide, what caused you to decide you wanted to write this? Did you one day think, oh my gosh, here it is, here's the story, and you started writing? Or did you just kind of start reflecting and it started evolving into what it wanted to evolve? And I love poets because I don't think all poets realize this, but when they produce something that really touches people, it's not really them, it's them in partnership with creative intelligence, right? Like flowing through you
Absolutely.
and
Absolutely.
using your unique experience of being human to express something that it can't express by itself without you, and you can't express fully without being in partnership with the divine or the quantum realm or whatever you want to
Absolutely.
call it.
Right.
So
Absolutely.
like
Yeah.
so first, like what was, how did it come about? And then tell us a little bit about the story, whatever you want to share to get people interested in wanting to read this novel.
Yeah. So the story basically started 20 something years ago, actually longer than that.
Hmm.
And it was about a relationship that I had with an individual that I was very close to. And the individual, it was a female friend of mine, and we were very close for several years. And later on in life, as she got older, and she was a little bit older than I was, one day she wrote me about a 5-page letter. And she passed away, I think, about 10 years ago. And she wrote me a letter, and she said, because we always talked about um, writing stories and writing novels. And she said, I want you to write something about us in some unique way. And so I tried to think of parallels between our friendship and my philosophical basis for the novel, and how I could create something about life and love and relationships. And so, I mulled this idea over for years and years and years. And 3 years ago, I thought, if I'm going to do it, I need to take the time and do it now, and make that a part of my daily life. And I used to write. I used to try to write 5 or 6 times a day, or a week, excuse me. Now I try to spend about 15 hours a week, whether I do a little bit every day or I write three
Hmm.
days a week. I try to commit to about 15 hours a week. And so the story is, partly fictional, partly biographical. There's a philosophical basis for the book, as far as belief systems go. So the basic story is about a guy named Jonathan Lancaster who is getting his PhD in philosophy. And he meets a lady named Sarah. And Sarah's coming off of a divorce, and she's married to a newspaper mogul whose family owns several newspapers throughout the country, and they're worth just millions and millions of dollars. And he has girlfriends in every town, and isn't a faithful husband. Well, Sarah catches him with a girlfriend one evening while she's out with their girls having dinner. And that's kind of the straw that broke the camel's back. She decides, I'm done. I don't need the money. I don't need the lifestyle. I just want a nice, simple life. So she ends up, filing for divorce, getting this divorce, and she ends up getting this job working in a bookstore. So she goes from being this
Mm.
wife with lavish money to working in a bookstore in a local
Oh.
liberal arts university in Williamstown, Massachusetts. And just so happens, Jonathan goes in one morning to return some books. He's getting his PhD, doesn't need this stack of used, college textbooks. So he's returning them. And he meets Sarah for the first time. And so they have some light interaction, nothing more than that. And that's about it. So a few days goes by. He sees some friends at one of the local diners just off the campus, and he runs into her again with some friends that he knows, and they strike up a conversation. And so what they find out over time is they start kind of running into each other more and more now that they've met. And so they kind of have a friendship, and they kind of cut up, and and talk, and and kind of get to know each other, and end up going out on a date several months later. And that one date leads to two, and then to three, and then they eventually decide, I think I'm interested in you. And so they end up kind of committing to each other, and they end up falling in love, and they spend the rest of their life together. And what they learn about each other is that in this moment, that what they found was completely unexpected, they
Mhm.
found the love of their life. But how you find out about this couple that lived in the 1960s and the 1970s was by a guy who was in our time, and his name is Henry. And Henry drives to work every day, and he has like a restored building in the downtown Main Street area of Williamstown. It's a library slash coffee shop, restaurant. And he's restored this building, and he's really a pillar of the community, even at 28 years old. And so he drives by this old abandoned house every single day, and he wonders how come no one's ever purchased the house, how come no one's ever restored it, and why is it still vacant? So he gets in contact, and he reaches out to a person within his bank to see who owns the property, and they get him in contact with a trust. And he reaches out to the trust, and through some negotiation, he buys this house. And while restoring it and tearing out the old plaster walls, he finds a journal that had been written by Jonathan Lancaster in the 70s that goes into his life with Sarah and this love affair that they had, and his lectures with Stephen Hawking, the books that he had written, this amazing philosopher that he turned out to be, the once a month meetings between the dean of philosophy, theology, history, literature, and this little
Mm.
congregation that they had once a month where they talked about politics and religion, and talked about whiskey and bourbon and scotch, and smoked their pipes and cigars, and these little intricate groups that exist among the main story as well. And then you get into the philosophical basis of the book, which is John giving his dissertation on his philosophical beliefs on the fabrication and plagiarism of religious belief systems in our society, and how they mold us. And basically, what we're doing is we're worshiping invisibility, and that there are over 4,000 religions in the world. All of are fabricated for a certain reason, whether it be initially because we want to have a connection, or whether it's out of control. But all of those are fabricated, and there's none that really hold any tangibility. And that he believes, through his philosophical basis, that faith is actually the worst form of belief, because it's all you have when you have no tangibility. And he believes, as people, that it is our very right to question God. It is our very right to ask questions and not be submissive to what appears to be a dictatorship. And so he goes into all this in his dissertation. Now, John believes in a creator. He believes that, what are the odds of the things in the universe that go into its creation to be exactly precise for there to be life? Now, statistically, the odds are like one in a trillion trillion. So, what are the odds of there being the right amount of gravity, the right amount of hydrogen and atoms and quarks and protons and neurons and all those things that allow life to take place? So he believes that there is absolutely a creator, whether it be he, she, they, them, we just don't know. But he believes once life is given to the universe as a collective whole, everything at that point plays out on its own. There is no direct intervention
Mm.
from the
Mhm.
creator, that life plays out as it's supposed to, and that we as humans have the ability through prayer to heal things, to do things, but there may be no direct intervention from God whatsoever, other than the life force that you've been given and your ability as a human to change life around you. And so we fabricate belief systems, in his opinion. They facilitate a need or a purpose, but that none of them are valid in the end. And that we need to, as a society, move away from that, or it sets us on a path where we feel like we have prophetic destruction in our future. Instead of looking at ways that we can change society, to further us from a humanitarian standpoint.
I love it. I love it. That's perfect. That's enough to get people hungry, no matter if they're like a love story or they like the knowledge part
Right.
of it or they
And,
like the
and
religious part of it.
And Henry, who's in our time, who's basically narrating the story, he has
Okay.
his whole life too. He has a love interest. There are sub characters on that end of the book, as well as the narrative end where he's narrating John and Sarah's story. So you basically have two separate love stories taking place 50 years apart, several sub characters, a philosophical basis for the book, all going on at once. So it's a very deep, intricate read, but I think it's very gripping. And I think once you sit down and you open the pages, I think you won't want to put it down. Yeah,
Well, it's a story for our time too, right?
I hope
So,
so. I hope so.
finally, there are some, films uh that are beginning to reflect better, sort of, for that are more forward looking and sort of affirming of there's something new that's trying to be born, right? So the old
Right.
templates and formulas are like they're kind of stopping working. And for the longest time on Netflix, I was drawn to foreign films more than anything
Me too.
because
Absolutely.
because American, industry, because they're driven by, well, not the independents, of course, but the big ones are
Right.
driven by profit so much. There, it's just so watered down, So, but
Yeah.
finally, like the in my intro, I talked a little bit about the film Poor Things, and then there have been a couple what is it, Leave Our Life Behind and Silent Night, that are really like, ooh, they're different enough that you can't necessarily know, like there's something there but you don't know. And that's Carl Jung's. That's good because Carl Jung talks about the difference between a symbol and a sign. And a sign meaning we know the meaning, we know what it
Right.
stands for, but a symbol is communicating something that's not yet able to be articulated. And that's what we want. Those are the
Right.
archetypes that
Absolutely.
want to expand our consciousness. So I love it. So I can't wait till you're done, and for me, and we'll bring you back on, and
Absolutely. I
we'll
love
we'll
it.
promote the heck out of it. So speaking of promoting, then how do people? I will put links, and I'm going to do a little thing in my newsletter. But how do people find you? Where are you? I know you're on Instagram.
Honestly, I think for me, social media is there's too many avenues for me to keep
Mhm.
up with between
Yeah,
Facebook and Instagram and TikTok and Twitter and all of that. I have a Twitter account, but I rarely put anything on there. I use too many words, and Twitter's just doesn't
yeah,
allow me to express myself. So
yeah.
I would say right now, the main avenue for me posting or my writings is on Instagram,
Okay, great.
just because it allows me to kind of express myself better than limiting me what Twitter would. Yeah,
Yeah, great. So we'll share Instagram. That's a place good to start. And you'll be updating people there anyway on your book. So if they follow you on
absolutely.
Instagram, they'll know what's going on with you. So that's great. So lastly, like I call this time the age of the individual, because the out of all, I mean, Carl Jung's work is like right,
Yeah,
right.
I
But
mean,
the one, the
brilliant
thing
area.
that, yeah, the thing that just really motivates me is this, his warning about the fate of humanity depending upon the self-reflecting individual.
Absolutely.
And that even though you don't see the outcome of your self-reflection only in, you know what I mean? When you self-reflect, it changes you and you are putting something out in the world. Just like in the early 80s, so much was unleashed from the collective unconscious, having to do with the changing notions of women and men and women's rights, and so much was born, so much creativity. The Lifetime cable network brought consciousness raising to domestic violence,
Right,
and for the first time, and it wasn't until like the mid 80s when raping your wife was even a crime. It was like okay before then. Like there was just all of this. And how did that all happen? It was like individual self-reflection that then eventually coalesced, and it unleashed
right.
something new from the collective unconscious. So I think like that's what needs to happen. That's what's happening now. You can see it. There's like quiet movements all over the place, but
And
but
we
more
need that.
people.
No,
We need more people.
we need
Yeah.
that on an ongoing basis. And again, because that evolves within itself. And
Mhm.
we need that ongoing evolution of that. And, we touched base, I think, a couple weeks ago when we were talking about blindness. And when we're blind, we can no longer change the things that need to be altered. And so that's where we have to be able to look
Yeah.
beyond what's out there so that we have that clarity to make change. And we're walking around in a state of blindness, we're no longer capable of doing that.
Yeah, and also everybody plays the role, right? It's like we're a big play, and there are certain people who are the antagonists, right? So they can't self-reflect, but the people who can self-reflect have to go deeper and deeper and deeper to
Right.
self-reflect on behalf of those people who can't. So you can't be mad at those people. They just are what they are, right?
Right. I agree.
But
I
but
agree.
if you're, if you're capable of self-reflection, it's time to go deeper. And so, so I guess the last thing would be like, do you have any advice or I don't know, just something to tell people practical, like, okay, here, try this, and it might get you on the road to
Absolutely.
self-reflection.
I think I, for me, and I talk about this with my clients all the time, because everybody struggles with their own issues when it comes to nutrition or exercise or consistency or commitment. I honestly think at the end of every single day, we all should sit down at some point and write down the things that we felt that we need to reflect on or change about ourselves.
Mm,
We need to be able to look at it on paper and visualize that and really look at the necessary steps that we need to make and take to evolve as a person. I think when we become stagnant as people, that is really bad for us from an individual standpoint. And no one should want to be stagnant in life. And we should always, no matter how young or old we are, evolve continually as a human being. And there's so many avenues that allow us to do that, but I think it absolutely starts with being able to reflect and to be able to discern the changes that need to be made in our lives to help us take those necessary steps. Yes,
yeah,
absolutely.
and maybe you don't know what the changes are, but I love how you said journaling without using the word journaling because people are like, oh,
Yeah,
trying to get my clients to journal because they don't even know why they're resisting journaling. But just
yeah,
say,
yeah.
just write down at the end of the day,
Right.
what happened today? When were you mad? When were you happy? Like
Yeah,
whatever. It doesn't even matter
yeah.
what you write. Something will happen.
Absolutely, it will. Yeah.
Oh, fantastic. I love it. Well, thank you so much for allowing me to share you with my listeners and viewers and taking time to,
And
and
thank you
also,
for
and
having
also,
me.
yeah, and also reading something for us that was special.
Yes,
Thanks.
yeah. I'll have to practice that and do a little better next time.
I thought it was
Change my
good.
octaves and my pace a little bit better. Yeah, yeah.
I thought it was pretty good though. You didn't read it too fast. So,
Right.
so yeah, again, thanks. I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Johnny Price, poet, philosopher, writer, and so much more. If you're feeling antsy and anxious, that's yourself, capital S, your soul, prompting you to wonder more about the meaning of your life. Are you being called to play a role in holding space for others to contemplate these times instead of fearing them? Don't forget to rate, comment on, and share this interview with others who might enjoy it too. Until next time.